So, hello and welcome everybody. And for you guys out there watching, welcome. I'm Natalie, I'm from Noah's Ark, and I am joined today with my colleagues Alosa, Emma, and Ian from North Point Wellbeing. So, guys, if you could all introduce yourselves and just maybe share a little bit about what you do and your role, that would be brilliant. Can we start with you, Alosa?
Yeah, my name's Alosa. I'm Therapeutic Services Manager at Noah's Ark Centre, and I'm also a counsellor, psychotherapist, and I work with children, young people and adults as well. I started off that counselling journey working with children, so I'm really looking forward to our discussion today.
Excellent. And Emma?
Hi. Yeah, I'm also from the Noah's Ark Centre. I'm a psychotherapist. I work mostly with children and young people on the autism spectrum, but I work in primary schools as well with young children and secondary schools as well, where we use a lot of play in all areas of it. Yeah.
Excellent. And Ian, welcome once again, and thank you for joining us.
Welcome. I'm Ian Wood. I work for North Point Wellbeing, part of the Open Minds Partnership. Open Minds is the new name for Calderdale CAMS, but my job is to work with schools to help the school staff, the team, the community within the school to ensure children have better well-being, I suppose.
Excellent, excellent. So today's topic, we're going to explore this idea of play. And obviously we all use therapeutically a lot of play in the work we do with children, with young people, and I'm not going to exclude adults. Sometimes we use play with them too, don't we? But yeah, and I kind of had this idea of, this sort of vision of kids getting in the car after therapy and sort of going, hi, Mom, and Mom going, what did you do during your therapy? And the young person going, well, we played. And I kind of had this sort of idea of, oh, you played, you didn't talk about your problems. And the young person sort of going, no, Mom, we played, or Dad, we played. And I guess I just wanted to maybe use today just to demystify some of that work we do, and when we talk about play in therapy, and maybe just understand some of the rationale behind why we use play. And we use two types of play, don't we? Directed play, non-directed play. And I thought we might explore some of that today. So, guys, can I ask how you might use play, why you might use play in your different therapeutic approaches and the work you do? Yeah, could we kick off with you, Ian? How do you use play? I know you do work in schools and so forth, and how might you use it, and what do you sort of think the rationale behind it is?
Yeah, I mean, me personally, one of the things that I would suggest using play-based interventions would be really when a child doesn't have the language to describe, or the understanding to describe what it is that might be causing them distress, problems, an inability to kind of socialize, get on with others, learn, all those kinds of things. And play is one of the ways that we can work with young people where it's less threatening. There's not that use of language that's necessary for more traditional models. So the use of metaphors, the use of toys, the use of craft materials, a child can express themselves in a safe environment, being mindful, obviously, that there has to be some kind of structure around the play, so that the child can effectively express themselves in a way that's not having to use the adult world or the adult filters or the teenage filters. I mean, for me, I think play is really important for a child. It's a scaffold in their development. It's about developing new perceptions, new behaviours that can be internal and external. It's really about how a child discovers life, how they learn things, the patterns, the insights into their own culture and learning process. So it's really powerful stuff. And I think if you work with play through that mindset, then you can help a child learn, to explore. And again, I keep using the word safe. It's non-judgmental. It's protected. So yeah, so an example is I worked with a child a couple of years ago, and he was very nervous. He didn't really know how to speak to me. He never had to speak to me. He didn't really understand why people were worried about him. But one of the things we did was we used puppets. We started talking through the puppets, and he was very happy to talk through the puppet to another puppet, but face to face with me, he clammed up. He didn't have any answers, but was happy to play. Yeah, so it's a tool that I use a lot.
Wow. And just that what you said there about the puppets, it just the power of play. And I love that you know, as adults, we expect, you know, our language is words. We use words, obviously, for just how the humility of meeting a child and us just sort of saying, look, I'm going to come and meet you where you are at in your world. And your words are symbols, your words are metaphors, your words, the most natural thing in the world for a child to play. And the power of that with the puppets and you going into their world rather than, you know, come into my world and use words, you're going into their world and saying, you know what, it's okay, I'm going to come and meet you in your world.
Yeah.
And it's non-threatening and non-judgmental and safe.
Absolutely. Again, if you think fundamentally, play is something that's sort of innate. We're born with play.
Yes.
Lots of animals in the animal kingdom play, and we explore the world through manipulating toys, and we have playmates, and we have friends that we play with. We play with things, and we act out. And it's really about how we learn about each other as well. So people play roles. When I was young, you know, it wasn't common for us to play scenarios out that, you know, we acted like adults, or we acted like our friends, or like people from the films. And it seems to me to be an activity that really is necessary for successful development. And without it, I think, I mean, again, I'd obviously give people time to speak, other people, but children that I've witnessed that haven't had the opportunity to play developmentally, those people are in a lot of pain and a lot of turmoil, a lot of trouble internally. So without play, the world's an odd place for those young people. And often we get teenagers as they get older who've been through traumatic youth. They like to revert to play. So you might see quite a seemingly mature young adult falling into very kind of infantile play when they get the opportunity to. It's something that I think we need.
Yes, yes. Oh, I could not agree with you more. The power and it's such an important part of development, isn't it? And an opportunity for them to rehearse things, and it's non-threatening. It's like, no, the puppet said it, I didn't say it, the puppet did. It's wonderful, it's so powerful. Oh, you know, thank you. And that's just such a lovely insight into the power of play. And Alosa, can you tell us how you might use it and share a bit of the work? I know you use a lot of play, and I know you're like, a bit like me, we're just like quite naturally playful.
A little bit too much. Yeah. Sometimes a bit too much playful in our adult world, aren't we, Natalie? Yeah, I think I guess I'm a more non-directive approach with play. It's where I learnt a lot of those counselling principles of that we hold as counsellors around acceptance and empathy, and that was my learning quite early on through non-directive play. So it's something I've done from. It's a bit of, feels like it's my foundations almost, actually, does the play kind of approach.
Sorry, Vanessa, can I just ask you to clarify, but you mentioned directive and non-directive. Can you just help us understand when you say non-directive and directive, just help us understand a bit what you mean by that?
So when I think about non-directive, it's that idea that the child might have a range of choices, and I guess it's not always one or the other, non-directive or directive, because to a certain extent we're choosing what materials are going to be in the room for the child. You know, what is available. When you go into school, you don't have as much things as you might have in the playroom at Noah's Ark, for example, but you do take a certain choice of activities in there, you know, and then it'll be down to the child or young person decides from that range what they want to engage in, what they feel is appropriate to be that kind of avenue of communication. And
Right.
it's, I think I'm picking up that, you know, on that idea of safety as well. There's something about being able to choose that is quite, it's non-threatening, but it's, I don't know, I say that some children really can quite struggle to choose, but then that can be part of the focus of the work that you do with them, that, you know, and the outcome might be that they become much more self-confident and able to choose and able to lead. So I guess that non-directive approach is much more about the child leading the play. It's going with, it might be their choice of activity, it's what they want to do with the sand, what they want to do with the toys, what drawing they're going to do, and rather than you know, that idea of that we might often have as play being something, oh well, all children play and they get on with that. It's not just giving a child the tools and the things and there you go. It's about really being with them in that play, so really accepting their choices as well. And I really like the model by Dan Hughes that has he talks about really effective play therapy or therapeutic play in terms of dealing with trauma and healing and those kind of real difficult things that children need to process through that language of play, is doing that with another person who's, there's a playfulness, there's acceptance, there's a curious approach, so you're asking open curious questions that aren't not that, why are you doing that, you know,
Yeah.
oh that looks interesting, what's going on there, you know, and a fostering of empathy, so really kind of tuning in and trying to understand why a child is playing the way they are, or what's behind it, but understanding not in that threatening way that's kind of you know, that need to know. We all have this desire to know, don't we, what's often going on, and I know parents often have that feeling, but haven't you found out yet what's wrong with them, you know, what do you mean I'm going back to what you were saying, Natalie, you know, that idea that they're just playing, you know, but haven't they told you what they're worried about and where this comes from and what's really happening here? And I guess with children, it's not like that, because the language of play really is through the play. It's not, you don't then receive it in words that get processed in that cognitive way. It's about processing the feelings around it. And I think children are able to do that through play, that kind of processing things without having to explain. And if you, as the other person being with them, can do it without that feeling that you have to know, because a child doesn't know. We know that sometimes we have feelings, we don't really know where it comes from, but we try to explain it in the language that we have of words. And that's what children often do through the play, you know, and they often repeat stuff. That's the other thing, when it's child-led. Yeah, I've had pieces of work with children where they've come and they've done the same story. It's been their story, they've played it out, and I say the same, but it's never always quite the same. There's often little nuances, there's differences. But I think there's something about repetition in play as well, that and accepting that repetition, you know, not like, oh, I'm not playing that game again. And choice-led in the sense of thinking about games. Children like to make up the rules of games. So often we'll play, played things like little kind of football or skittles or that type, you know, things, games, but the rules are never quite what the rules, like if you went to the box of the rules, because the child makes up the rules. It's interesting. Sometimes they want you to win, sometimes they want themselves to win. Sometimes it's about sort of accepting and learning and reflecting some of those awarenesses maybe with the children while they're playing with you. I can see that you really like to win every time we play this, or, you know, you never want me to win this game, do you? I don't know, you know, it's about self-awareness as well, I think, through play.
Wow. Ella, so that Yeah, I can just hear how important the reflecting is and the attunement to where they're at and the going with their initiating and their flow and facilitating some of the. I love when you said that sometimes they don't always sort of, you know, they don't easily can make those choices when they come into the room. They might feel a bit overwhelmed, but it's that facilitating. And I thought about, you know, the developmental stages, and I thought about, you know, just helping kids initiate sometimes, and sometimes even that's building their confidence and their self-esteem. And um yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. So
the
it's that
lovely,
feeling at the end of a piece of work, because I know say at Noah's Ark they come for 12 sessions, you know, and sometimes parents might think they've just played through it, like you say, you know, they've just been playing throughout that time.
yeah,
But there is a transformation in the sense that some children really learn to be able to take that lead and
yes,
have that build up of confidence that actually I can
yes,
do this. And you'll hear them sometimes in the play. I've often heard them go, you know, I can do this, and you know, and you reflect that back to them. I can do it, and you know, and it feels a safe and celebration of
yes,
something, and that's reinforcing that repetition, and those skills get
yes,
reinforced, and they
yes,
can kind of go out into the world, hopefully, with a little bit of that sense of yeah, I can, or you know, they say I'm not great at art, but this feels good. This is good, you
yes,
know.
yes. And I guess we're not like other adults in their world a lot of the time when we're
Yeah.
when we're, you know, in therapy with them in the therapeutic space. It's a bit unusual. I think it takes a little bit of them sort of going, oh, she's a bit different. She's not like other adults in my world. She doesn't tell me what to do. She's, you know, and I think that's what's so magical about it, isn't it? Because outside there, they may not have that control. They may not have that potency. They may be waiting for an adult to tell them what to do all the time and direct them. But in the playroom, they're in control, and they learn about their own potency, and they learn about their limits, and it's just, it's great, isn't it? It's just a
Yeah,
wonderful, wonderful. Oh, I
it
love
is.
it.
It's
I can just see
exciting and it's
passion
growth.
in it.
And I think there's another misconception there, just picking up on something Ian said earlier, and what you're saying there now is that it doesn't mean that there isn't any rules. It doesn't mean that there
No,
isn't any boundaries, you know, that it's just a free for all, that, oh, you know, and I think that could be a misconception sometimes with
yes,
staff at, you know, in schools. They might sometimes think it's, oh, they do what they like with the counsellor,
yes,
you know, and it's not, they do what they like, but at the beginning we do set
yes,
certain boundaries and rules, and this is how, you know, we're going to respect each other. There's confidentiality.
so
At the same
important.
time, you know, this is how long it's for, and we need to respect the toys and the
Yes,
equipment, and you know, particularly those kind of rules when
yes.
it's, you know, the younger children. So it's
So
not
there
that
is
it's
the,
just free for
yeah,
all. There's a containment as well.
the containment.
Yeah.
That's so key for us therapists, isn't it? It's containment, having boundaries, modeling that, and being able to say, you know what, I'm not for hurting, I'm not for hitting, you're not for hurting, you're not for hitting, and setting those boundaries. Brilliant. Oh, Alosa, thank you. And I love your passion as well. And all of you guys, I get to see you all coming alive as we as we talk about this. Emma, I'm now really curious to know. You've been sitting there quietly, and I'm thinking I'm itching to ask you. Yeah, well, you work with a lot of the kids on the spectrum and the ASD kids. And
Yeah.
how does that work for you? And how do you use play? I'm just curious to know how you work with the kids.
Yeah, I think obviously all the children are very different, so some of it sounds very similar to how Alosa was speaking then, and that rings a lot of bells with me and my work. But some of the children play very differently in my service. They'll maybe line things up, or they'll play with things in a different way, that if things have got moving parts, they'll fixate on a moving part, and that is how they play. And I think it's bringing it back to that acceptance of not trying to make them fit into a different box and play a more traditional play in a traditional way. It's accepting that's helping them, and I think it brings them, sometimes it can regulate their emotions. Playing like that, it can give them a sense of control. I think it's really useful in a therapeutic way to have somebody who's not a parent and who's not a teacher that they can teach the boundaries to, because they can often get very upset if you touch what they're playing with, or if things are moved and they're not in a certain way, or if things are moved between week and week. If they've put something somewhere in a room and then somebody else has used that room and moved it, or another child has played with it, that can create a lot of issues for some of the children that I work with. So I think it's experiencing that, and experiencing that other people do use those things, and trying to create an understanding and a language around that as to why is that so upsetting for you, and getting them to understand why they're feeling as they're feeling. But by doing it all through play, it's like Alosa said, just very accepting and very, very non-judgmental, really, and you showing that interest, which other adults may not show that much interest, because it's often not that interest. They're just piling things up, or they're just lining things up, and but there's still the same questions to be asked, I suppose, and the same sort of conversations to be opened, even if they don't have the language to answer those questions, or to put that into words. That seed has been still planted. And I think a lot of stuff with my clients goes around sort of turn taking within play, and learning that back and forth, which then helps, again, like with what Ian was saying earlier, with the language surrounding play. It's turn taking in play then creates turn taking in conversation, and that back and forth, which some of the children that I work with really struggle with, and they're quite conscious as they get older. They're quite conscious that they struggle with the turn taking in a conversational way, and they get quite self-conscious, and they feel like they can't make friends. But by doing that in play when they're younger, they've got something to compare it to, and they've got something to work from, and it builds those skills, I think, for them. I think response times as well for my children. It's nice to be able to ask those open questions, like Alosa said, and not expect the answer back, and know that they are processing that, and they're working it all through in their own way, and just sort of sitting back a little bit as well, and not asking them the same question over and over again, because they've got it, they're processing it, and then maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks down the line, they'll answer that question and they'll say, I'm doing this because of this, and then you're like, oh, wow, they've remembered that, and it's amazing that what they do, really.
Oh, Emma, that's amazing. And I can hear some of the social skills that are, it's so fantastic, isn't it? Because not just is it helping with the emotions, but it's also very practical in helping with the social skills and their relationships in the wider world through their relationship with you. That's phenomenal. Just so amazing. And I love the idea of you going at their pace, and isn't that just so key, guys, when we're working with the kids, to go and respect their pace? Because obviously we're aware that, you know, the parents or school, whoever, want outcomes, but we know that the key is in going with the young person's pace and not bringing those expectations into the room necessarily, and directing and saying, well, why did you do that, or are you thinking about this, or you should be thinking about this or that or the other thing, but just respecting their process, because they know where they need to go, don't they? And it's a huge, it's such an important thing for us to attune with their process. I just love what you guys are saying. It's just like, oh yeah, this is why we do what we do in the play therapy room.
When you say going at their own pace, Natalie, it was just coming into my mind and thinking about how it's not always got to be like this long-term therapy thing that kind of, it's something that you can do quite consciously as a parent. I know as a parent, I've done it before when my son's been at the park, for instance, and I've just decided, I remember deciding one day, I'm going to give my son this attention, and whatever he wants, you know, it sounds daft, but we don't always attend, do we? We might be on our phone, or we might be looking at somebody else, and we're quite happy, and our children are off playing, and that's fine, you know what I mean? But sometimes if you're going there and it feels like, or you're doing something together, it really is like you've got that time together, even if it's just 10 minutes. There's something really powerful about attentive play, you know, really,
Yes.
even if you're not asking any questions, because I remember right at the beginning of my training in that area, a lot of it is just what, you know, observing and being with, not not giving the toys and going off somewhere else or at the park and stuff, but really being attentive and just watching. And it might only be for a very short period of time,
Yes.
but children really feel it. They
Oh,
really feel it as that power. And I remember my son going at that park saying, afterwards, I'd just chosen to really attend for that 10 minutes. And probably more than 10 minutes actually, but while we were there, and at the end him saying, Mum, that was the best time at the park I've ever had, you know. And I didn't say to him, yeah, because I really focused on doing what you know. So as a parent, you can try and do some of that kind of acceptance and
yes.
curiosity and
Yes.
staying with. I think that idea of really just being with and staying with
Yes.
children while they play.
Oh no,
Um,
so that's so,
Practicing it, doing it in short
yeah.
amounts maybe, and then you know, increasing that as it becomes more comfortable, because like you said, Emma, it can be quite um I mean taxing, but it is, you know, you're putting your energy into something. You are kind of, you're making that conscious decision to really
Mm.
be with that child for
Yeah.
for that time. So and to be really accepting of what they're doing. So it does take something out of you, and it does take a bit of practice, I think. It's not
Yes.
easy, and there might be things that that make it more difficult for you as a parent, or you know, as somebody in school, to always really just stay with a child. But I think it can, you know, it can happen with practice.
That's so powerful. And we underestimate the power of that being with attuning to, and the child being seen and truly seen. I think that's amazing, because kids are becoming, aren't they? They're future orientated, but they don't go like with adults who might say, oh, so, you know, how shall we talk about the past, or shall we bring the past into the room and talk about it? But with kids, they just bring it in through their play, and they may not want to talk about last session. They're very in the present moment and future orientated. So, and just respecting where they're at. But I love that idea of being curious and just having, and it's about an attitude for me. It's about an attitude of just being curious and allowing them to teach me and educate me, and what does their world look like and how does it look through their eyes, you know, and getting behind their eyes in a sense to see the world the way they see it. I just think there's something so powerful about that. Ian, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you used the word powerful, and I really agree with that. I mean, play is a powerful means of learning fundamentally, because it involves that imagination and, like I say, that curiosity. You're acting as if, and it's that taking on different roles. You're taking on different perceptions and positions within sort of relationships, and it's that as if those important life skills that you learn by acting. You can learn new communication skills. You can learn how to cooperate. You have people in those groups of play where there's hierarchies. So, somebody might take a leadership position, and again, these kind of expressions, these ways that young people can separate themselves from real life and act out of life. I think that's the bit I think people misunderstand. You know, it's easy to observe somebody playing, but what are they actually doing whilst they're playing? Again, just thinking about my own daughter when she was little, first sort of play really, it's that kind of playing with food, pulling faces, blowing raspberries. But then when they get a little bit older, it's about that imagination. It's making the toys into characters, or making mess into an object. So making things out of sand, it could be birthday cakes or, you know, whatever. And then it develops then from that into roles and having play friends. So you can see that development whilst you're watching your children grow. When you watch them on the street playing, the older they get, the roles change. And again, I think we forget as well, adults, we play also. It's just we call it things like sports. So we go out and play games, or we do things for entertainment.
Yes.
And we just have a role for it, whereas children, it's still that same stuff. It's just we treat it as adults being something, that's what they're doing. So yeah, to watch children play, but then to understand the power of that, like you said, and then to harness that to help somebody and to guide them with these scenarios, again, these imaginary scenarios, that it fills those gaps. So there might be some areas for development that are missing, and those gaps can be filled by teaching through play those new roles. And I think that's really what I'm passionate about play. I think, again, right at the beginning I was saying it's that idea of it being safer. What's the distinction between somebody who's playing something and doing it for real? And again, there's lots and lots of therapeutic research into that. So how can we tell if somebody's play fighting versus fighting for real? There has to be distinctions, and that's where it becomes safe, because play is different to the real thing. And that's what makes it such a safe form of therapeutic intervention. Again, you mentioned, all of you, about making sure that those boundaries are adhered to. Absolutely, and that's where the creative therapeutic process comes in. But it's not much about that for me. It's more about what's taking place and why it's taking place and what could that be used for.
Yes.
Discoveries, curiosities, that you were mentioning.
That's so powerful, absolutely. And as you were saying that, I just thought it's also a safe way to actually access some very traumatic material, where adults would talk about perhaps, have flashbacks or talk about their past traumas. Kids, it's a safe way to access some of that trauma through the play. And what I also love about it is they can remake the ending. So they can reframe it in a sense through their play. And I think that's where I just love the therapeutic process in the room, where you start to see them, yes, like you were saying, Alois, so they repeat things, but you start to notice that towards the end, there's sometimes these subtle changes where actually the outcome becomes different. And then you might not understand what's going on, but something is shifting. And then it starts to play out in their wider world, that they're much more calm maybe, or they're a bit more, the behavior is changing. And you may not think, but actually it comes back to the fact that something's shifted in their unconscious, because it is all quite unconscious at times. We don't know sometimes what they're doing, why they keep burying the doll under the sand, or, I just find that fascinating that they can work through this unconscious trauma in such an expressive way, even though nothing may be said, articulated about it, and yet we know something has shifted in the play. I just wondered what your thoughts were about that, because I find that fascinating.
Yeah, because language is only part of our brain structure, isn't it? And we know that kind of trauma needs to be processed in order for there to be healing. And I think play is a very healthy way of healing, and from your simple coping mechanisms around stress and processing small stresses, and talk about as adults being playful. We have our defenses in our humor. Often, we talk about humor being a higher order kind of defense mechanism. It's a healthy kind of defense often, and you find people that work in very stressful situations use humor a lot and are more playful maybe in the way that they are with each other. I imagine that's how a lot of these doctors will have been coping at this time. They do have a certain playful sense because it's a very healthy way of coping with stress. So and I just think about all that, in the brain, but rather than it becoming stuck somewhere, it's, even though we don't know how it's compartmentalized in there, it's the process it's happening through the play. And I think, I'm always, it always feels quite sad when you hear parents or people say, oh, stop playing, or play is seen as very much, you do that when you're little, and then that oh, you shouldn't, that's it then, you know. And I mean, it's quite sad with the curriculum, really, in a way, that come, is it year 1, is it, or year 2? No, year 2, year 3, they stop playing as much, you know. It's all very much more, this is the academic, as though there's a distinction between academia and play, whereas play is still a very healthy process to have. And I think in order for some of our children now going back to school over the coming months, not even just now, but, you know, months time, as they need to process a lot of these changes and traumas, maybe big, maybe small, a playful environment is quite key. You know, I think at home and at school, it'll be to enable them to process and to enable them to cope with that stress that's going on. There's a relieving aspect to play, I think, that's felt in the body as well. Just like when you laugh, you feel it in, you know. I think when you're able to let things out, even if you can't understand it, it's healing.
Yes. Oh, and isn't it so powerful to have, I'm just thinking about the mirroring, you know, when we play, to have somebody mirror it back to you. Like, I was just thinking about, sorry, Eloise, I'm putting you on the spot a bit, but I was just thinking about how sometimes you explain how, you know, how you sort of sing a song, you do a rhythm together, and you may play the drums, and then, you know, you mirror that back, and how powerful that is to have an adult.
And sometimes, I mean, I'd go back to like Ian was saying, sometimes things like that are often the only way in with some children to engage, and they can be very challenging, maybe behaviour. I've worked with some very challenging boys, for instance, that you know, who are just bringing you resistance in some way, you know, and you're trying to find some way in to kind of, because you're accepting but you're holding the boundaries, and there's some way in, and often it's through those little mirroring activities. So you see them do something and you're like, right, I'm in, you know, some kind of, I remember, you know, some young boy I'm remembering doing some kind of little tap on the table, and I'm like, right, I'm in there, you know, and then it builds up and it becomes a little bit of a, you know, a back and forth, like you were saying, Emma. So sometimes it's finding your way in to connect with, because play is about connection as well, isn't it? Building those connections, real and imaginary, and how you can link those, you know, how those two are sort of linked together as well. Yeah, so I think play is definitely, there's little things you can build on and validate, really, I guess, is there's some validating going on there when you're mirroring those activities, and often that's the missing need with children who are behaviourally challenged, that they're really yearning for something of them to be validated. And obviously it's really hard amongst all the resisting behavior, all the challenging behavior, but if you can find something even as small as, you know, just to kind of connect with them in some way. And I think some teachers do that really successfully, I think, you know, and I think there's you know, a lot, and people will wonder, why does he behave so well in so and so's class? But maybe they've just tapped into something, you know, with playful, and it's often something a little bit playful they've tapped into, and maybe it's also unique to that relationship. We all like to have a little kind of unique, maybe kind of playful kind of, or a humor, or something that's unique to certain relationships. I think we quite like that as human beings.
I love that. It's like a little hook, isn't it? Sometimes you do a little rhythm, or you do a little dance, or you have your it really is a language, isn't it? It's phenomenal, and it's such a privilege to be able to be invited into a child's world. I always find that like sacred ground, you know. You're letting me in, you're inviting me in. That's so, yeah, just amazing. I think
again, it's really interested in that idea of sort of humour as well, because play really contains that, you know, to some degree, a kind of an imitation of life. So it has to have exaggeration, has to have sort of mockery, parodying and reflecting sort of some amounts of your own kind of fragility. You can take silly aspects of yourself and exaggerate those things to kind of see how the world reacts about that. But again, I'm glad you mentioned it, that again, the other element of play is, you mentioned dance. I mean, if you think about dance, dance is fun, it's playful, but it's actually in the body as well.
Yeah.
So it's about the way that we move in the world. It's about how we mimic and we test ourselves. Can we do those things? Can we move in that way? And just like any kind of memory, muscle memory is really important for our well-being, for our physicality. But how to navigate our way through the physical world, if we can use our bodies in the right way, I think that's important. Again, I think it's quite appropriate at the moment, talking about cultural issues. Through play, you can learn about culture and different aspects of different cultures as well. So to be not exposed to cultural play and difference and dance and rhythm, again, you're less flexible in the way that you're positioned in your journey through life. So you've got less resources to be able to solve problems as they arise. So the more we play, the more we have more tools in our toolkit to get us through the stuff of life, if that makes sense. Yeah, it's quite a big, deep thing, but
No, oh, absolutely. And the word resilience came to my mind as you said that, Ian. It's that part of building, isn't it? That resilience as well is so important. But it's a universal language is play,
yeah,
and it connects. It's we underestimate the power so often of play, and I'm so glad we're having this conversation today. Just because I know we're all so passionate about it, and because we know we've seen firsthand just how powerful it is. Oh, Emma, and can you just tell us a little bit more about sort of maybe how you might use play and the tools you might use? And yeah, if we can just comment on sort of, I suppose I'm just thinking about transferring some of those tools to, parents or to teachers, and how I'm just aware of the time as well. How can we transfer some of those things that, and what's important for them to know about play, and for parents to know about how they might help their kids, even if they are in therapy or even if they're not in therapy, but just to engage in some of that play.
I think a lot of it is listening really to that child and to how that child plays and accepting how they play. And I think it's important to understand how they're feeling with certain things. I know a lot of my children get overwhelmed if there's too much choice of things to do. So sometimes it's actually better to be more directive, but then listen when they don't want to do that particular thing and give another option, but not overwhelming that child, I suppose. And I think it goes back to the mirroring. I think the mirroring is so important, and the modeling, I think, as well, because if a child doesn't want to play, it might not be that they don't want to, it might be that they're nervous, or that they don't understand how to. And it's respecting that child's way, I suppose. Sometimes if a child's doing something on their own and doesn't want you to help and doesn't want you to join in, it's easy to feel disheartened and to just let them get on with it. You could do that same exact activity at the other side of the room. You do yours, they do theirs, and then it's up to them. If they don't want you to touch theirs, they often feel more comfortable touching yours. So you make your tower or your line or your whatever they're doing, and they can come to you then, and they can come and tell you, oh no, you're doing that wrong. Usually you're doing that, no, this is not how you do it, I need to redo it all now. But it's made that connection. It's joining the two activities together without agitating them, really, without getting them stressed because you're touching their stuff, they're touching your stuff, in a way.
That's so good. No, that's so helpful, isn't it? It's just, again, understanding what is their preferred way to play, how to join in. And this is the other thing. Sometimes I think it's quite a skill, isn't it? Because we can say, oh yeah, we're going to go and play with our kids, but how are we doing it? It's the how, isn't it? It's the how.
And whether the children want to. And I remember working with a boy who, I think he'd got into this character that, no, I'm not engaging, I'm not going to play, I'm not doing any of this. And he would sit in the corner of the room facing the wall, and I would play on my own. For that three weeks I played on my own, and then in the fourth week I think he just joined in, and he was absolutely fine from then. And it's just giving him that control, and that you don't have to do this if you don't want to do it, but he did want to do it, and you could tell he did want to do it. It wasn't that he got himself into this. He was the role of the naughtiest boy at school, and he was fulfilling that role until it was made clear that he didn't have to fulfill that in that space.
Wow.
I think there's something there that you've brought up, Emma, about being kind to yourself, because sometimes, like you, and goes back to what you were saying, in that, you know, if you've missed out on play yourself as an adult from when you were a child, maybe you didn't experience the kind of play that we're talking about, and you may not have quite that same toolbox, you know, at your disposal. It can feel quite overwhelming to play with your own children, and it can. Sometimes I think adults feel embarrassed to play, embarrassed that they're going to make a fool of themselves. So they feel those same fears that maybe children often feel with their peers at times, especially if it's some pressures put upon it of some kind, you know, or some judgment of some kind is placed, whether it's from parents, whether it's from other friends, or you know, school or something. You know, it becomes it can become quite a scary thing, play, I think, and a scary thing for adults to play with the children. Am I getting it right? And I think what the message is, there is no right or wrong, just be with it. And even if it's a little bit rejecting for you, I'm hearing there, like in your story, Emma, you know, there's something about persistence, acceptance and persistence, and acceptance, persisting in that acceptance, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That is supportive in the end, and having that kindness that to yourself, that it's not always easy to play and to give that, you know, it's a practice, it's something that is practiced. And maybe something that we haven't really talked about, stories. I don't know, Natalie, whether you want to say something about, we've talked about telling kind of stories through play, but sometimes if you're not always feeling great about making a fool of yourself or being embarrassed, you can do it through the medium, or maybe as adults it's often easier to do it through the medium of telling a story that someone else has written, and the pictures are there, and as you get more comfortable in that, maybe have voices, and oh, my child likes it when I do the voice like this, and you know, they're giving you validation then as well, aren't they, about, oh, I like you reading this story, and often they like the same stories coming back.
So if you're shamed in life, the child, then it's hard for you to navigate that. Oh, don't be silly, grow up, and the negative, and internalize some of the shame and the negative messages that teach us about, don't they? Which again, they're just the best teachers in the world. I think they've got like this wisdom in terms, just need to try it more as well. But I absolutely, stories, and don't limit it. I mean, I just think sometimes it's very powerful just to go with, like, if a kid's make, you know, allow them to, you know, teach you about the song, join in with the song, like, what is the sun saying to the bird, and what would the bird say to the, you know, it can be so silly, but it's just go with it, yeah, and let them teach you about who they want you to be in the story, or who they want you to be as a puppet, or who they want you, you know, what do they want you to do? Are you the teacher, or are you the child? Where do you want me to sit? What do I, you know? And it gives them so much confidence to direct that, doesn't it? Oh, I love that. Oh, guys, I'm just aware of the time, but yeah, any final thoughts, anything that you think we could leave people with, or any final ideas
I think
before we go?
my perspective is that whether you're sort of working in the industry of sort of therapy, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a pastoral member of staff, it's always to have in the back of your mind the idea of the things we've been talking about. For one question I often get asked when I'm training other therapists is, you know, what if the child doesn't want to be there? What if the child won't answer my questions? So the question I get is, what if a kid says, I don't know? When they say I don't know to a question, they'll repeat it over and over again, and I get stuck. And I always say, well, that's the place you start from. What is I don't know like? So you can go into a metaphor, you can go into a story. But then the other side of the coin is if a child isn't wanting to do that stuff, argued to him. The kid didn't really want to be there. He needed help, but he didn't ask for the help. It was kind of forced on him. So I just said, look, mate, you can either go back to class, or we can use this time to trust each other, to learn about each other. Oh, I don't want to do that. I said, all right, okay. Right then, well, what we'll do is I found an apple in the fruit bowl. I said, well, can you catch? Yeah, I can catch. So we just basically just threw this apple backwards and forwards for about 15 minutes. Then it became a little bit aggressive. So we went outside and didn't necessarily getting him how to get, wasn't willing to participate. So I fell into the play model. And then over time, we started to have the conversations. But it was a tool as a backup to get out of an awkward situation. My pressures, my feelings, my stuckness allowed me through that medium to become unstuck. So there's nothing wrong with, oh, this kid doesn't want to be here. Well, let's make it fun. Let's make it interesting. It doesn't have to be about digging. It has to be about trusting and relating and playing. So
I love that.
just, if in doubt, that's another tool, and play is useful. It's not a cop-out. It's not an excuse for something else. It's not making that kid get away from their problems, and it's not rewarding children's behaviour by allowing them to have time out. It's developmental. It's all the things that everybody's been talking about.
I love that. And I loved how that was a way in for you. You found the way in. It's so powerful. And then you can get on to all the stuff, but it's that relationship. If you haven't got the relationship, then where do you go? It's building that relationship. I love that, Ian. And I always, when you said, when all else fails, and I just thought about what somebody said to me, when all else fails, just get the Play-Doh out. I think it was you, Emma, that said that. Just get the Play-Doh out, or reach for the, like you say, the apple. It's just so powerful and so helpful sometimes, is play, just to, even with the older kids, it can just be a way in, can't it, and to build that relationship. Oh, guys, thank you once again. You've all shared so generously. I need to go and play. I'm struggling with my words.
I'll just point out, Natalie, because we're doing this in our week. We've just week of having put up on our website some pages, showing some examples of play. There's some videos of us sort of being a bit fools, but there's some theory behind that. For example, there's some taking turn kind of activities, and some stories, and some things that, as parents or as staff, you might want to put in your toolbox, and that'll be developing and growing over the coming weeks as well. And I think there's something that I'd leave with people is I think I said this in an earlier video a long time ago about returning to school, but something about being spontaneous, pick up that apple, pick up the Play-Doh, think about what's going to be right in that moment in order to make the connection. Because without that connection and without that relationship, you won't get the academic learning, you might not get the all that attainment and all that catch up that you want out of your kids kind of moving forward. There's so much more going to be connected and attuned and want to do the activities after that, if they've been able to connect in this way, playful and humorous way. Sort of a recovery model. I think sort of you may well think about it as a way of processing these things before they have to move on.
I love that. Oh, Lois, it's so true. And it really is all about relationship, isn't it? And communication. Absolutely. Anything on your mind before we go, Emma?
No, I think it's been really great that everybody's shared all their stories and all their ideas about how play works. So yeah, no, I just think it's so important and so rich is play that it's building that trust, and it's that lived experience for those children that you don't have to tell them, you don't have to get them to answer anything, you don't always have to dig for anything deeper. Sometimes it is just about building that relationship with a different person where they feel safe, where they feel listened to, where they can trust, and building that up then equips them for different situations in their life, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And it's just very healing, I think, as well.
Yeah. So, oh, guys, thank you once again. This has been absolutely amazing. I hope it's helped just to shed some light on why we use play and a little bit about how we use play. And thank you for all of your brilliant ideas and sharing your, your experience once again. And thanks, Ian, for joining us as well. You've been so patient and giving. So thank you for your generosity with your time. I appreciate it. And guys, take care. Have a great week and go and play. Bye for now.